Good evening, everybody. While I recorded Tuesday night's class, or I thought I actually wasn't recording Tuesday night's class, so I'm going to walk you through the slideshow that I presented live to the class. So here we go. It's going to let me just start with a blessing for study. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, supreme power of the universe. You sanctify our lives with mitzvot and give us the sacred obligation of learning and living Torah. So tonight we're going to talk about food and Judaism and answer the question, does God care about what we eat? And you'll find out the answer is yes. And the dietary laws of Judaism, or keeping kosher, um, well, we have, first of all, the word kosher. What does the word kosher mean? Like when you say something, well, that doesn't seem kosher to me. So it doesn't only deal with food. We see in the book of Esther that the word kosher um, can be translated as this is something that seems right or proper. In the book of Ecclesiastes, we have the word yichshar, which means is translated as something that's going to succeed. So um, there are different sources for laws of kashrut, and so this does pertain to eating, and these laws can be found starting in, well, actually including, not starting, but in Leviticus chapter 11, verse 1 through 8. This talks about all of the creatures that we may eat from among all the land animals. And then it goes on to say that any animal that has true hooves with clefts running through the hooves that chews the cud, such you may eat. And then it goes on to list some examples of those animals um, that are both forbidden and not forbidden. A daemon, although it chews its cud, has no true hooves. It's unclean for you. The hare, or rabbit, although it chews its cud, it has no true hooves. It's unclean for you. And the swine, although it has true hooves, with the hooves cleft through, it doesn't chew the cud. It is unclean for you. You shall not eat the flesh or touch their carcasses. They are unclean for you. Okay, so just to recap from the book of Leviticus, we have two criteria for animals that live on the land that make them okay to eat or kosher for us, at least eligible to be kosher. So they have to have cloven hooves. Like here's an example of a cloven hoof on a cow in particular. And it has to chew its cud. And what is that? That means it has like a bifurcated stomach. The animals that eat a lot of grass or grain and they store it in one stomach, and then they work hard to do that. And then when they have leisure, like at night, or just sitting around in the shade, they can regurgitate that into their mouths and then chew it up and swallow it down to their next stomach. So animals that chew their cud are eligible and have cloven hooves. So here are the animals that are eligible. And these are broad categories: addax, antelope, bison, cow, deer, gazelle, goat, sheep, and ibex are those categories. And each of them have their own subfamilies that one can eat from. So those are eligible to be kosher. Just by virtue of those two things, they're not entirely kosher because there's another step that we'll talk about a little bit. Okay, horses. Well, a lot of people eat horse meat, but Jews don't because they don't have cloven hooves. Pigs, they have cloven hooves, but they don't chew their cud. And as I mentioned in class, pigs get a bum rap as like being the poster animal for non-kosher meat. But pig meat is no less kosher than horse or rabbit or any other animal that doesn't have both of those things. But our rabbis tell us that pigs, in particular, because they are sneaky, because they look like they might be kosher because they have those cloven hooves. So they're trying to entice us to eat them with their cloven hooves, say the rabbis uphold. Um, Going on, rabbits. Nope, not kosher. Some people eat meat rabbits, but we don't. Some people eat frog legs. Kosher Jews do not. because they don't have those criteria. Snakes, nope, no reptiles, because they have neither of the criteria. All of these ain't kosher. All right, now let's go on. Things that live in the water. Anything that lives in the water, whether the seas or the streams, that has fins and scales, these you may eat. And if they have no fins or scales, amongst all the swarming things in the water and among all the other living creatures that are in the water, they are an abomination for you. An abomination for you. They shall remain. You shall not eat of their flesh. You shall abominate their carcasses. Everything in water that has no fins and scales shall be an abomination for you. Why do I keep emphasizing the word abomination? It comes up many times. The word in Hebrew is sheketz. Sheketz literally means you can't touch this. It's an abomination. And from this word, the Yiddish word shegetz and shiksa come. And these are a category of people that are forbidden to Jewish boys and girls. Usually referring, it's a derogatory term for a non-Jewish girl, a shiksa, or a non-Jewish boy, a shegetz. Derogatory and something that's pretty much fallen out of usage these days. So, all right, going on. So anything from the waters has to have fins and scales. And here's some examples. Okay, like trout, yes. Salmon, yes. Tuna, yes. Shark, no, doesn't have scales. Eel, no, doesn't have scales. Dolphins, oh, yeah, no scales. You don't eat dolphin. A lobster, neither fins nor scales. Not kosher. Shrimp, same, not kosher. Gefilte fish, yes, kosher and delicious. Now, let's go on. Things that fly in the air, the birds. Now, this doesn't tell us what criteria that it uses, but it just says these birds are an abomination. They shall not be eaten. The eagle, the vulture, the black vulture, the kite, falcons of every variety, ravens, ostriches, nighthawks, seagulls, hawks of every variety, the little owl, the cormorant, the great owl, the white owl, the pelican, and the bustard, the stork, herons of every variety, and the hoopoe, and the bat. So these are all flying things that we may not eat. Now, we don't doesn't give a reason, but we can see that all of these are predatory animals, and a bat is not, even though it flies, it's not a bird at all. I don't know how it was categorized in biblical days as a bird. We know it now as a mammal. But if it's a bird, the Torah only gives a list of what birds not to eat. And they're birds of prey, scavenger birds. The following are birds that are customarily kosher: the chicken, the duck, turkey, geese. That is a grouse, or a what's the word for those? Not a grouse. It's a quail. Pheasants, doves, and chickadees. Okay, these you can't eat. Birds of prey, scavenger birds, trash-eating birds, everything-eating birds, not kosher. Now, this next text from the book of Genesis says that we can't eat any flesh. If we're going to eat meat, we can't eat any flesh that has its lifeblood in it. And then in Deuteronomy it says, don't partake of the blood. The blood is the life of the animal, and you must not consume the life of the animal with the flesh. You must not partake of it, and you must pour it on the ground like water. So any kosher meat has to have its blood leached out of it. So drained at the time of slaughter, and then with salt, the blood is leached from the meat. That's why kosher meat is a little bit salty. Chicken too, turkey. Let's see. So there are lots of rules around slaughtering it. And here's a source text in the book of Deuteronomy. It says, you may slaughter any of the cattle or sheep that the Lord gives you as I have instructed you. So there's instruction here. Now, what do the rabbis say what the instruction is? It's how it's killed. So not only do it to have those criteria that we talked about earlier, fins, scales, cloven hooves, chewits gut, and chewits gut, it has to be slaughtered in a certain way. And the ritual slaughterer or the butcher is known as a shochet. And the shochet has a special knife that he or she, I guess, uses. This knife has to be sharpened to the point of no nicks anywhere in it. It has to be just like razor sharp with no uh, nicks in it that would actually tear the flesh instead of cutting the flesh. It has to be done in one stroke in a very painless way that cuts the both the jugular cord, jugular vein, and the airway. So the animal doesn't even know it's been cut until it's already expired, because the knife is so sharp and the art of the butcher is so precise. Now, we did have a discussion in class about industrial kashrut and do they actually follow the spirit of the law, which is to be humane and treat the animals compassionately. If we must eat them, how do we slaughter them in a way that doesn't cause them any anxiety or pain? We had a long discussion about that. An animal that is not kosher or is not slaughtered in a kosher way is known as treif. Treif literally means, it's a Yiddish word, it means torn. So that refers to the knife that has a nick in it. That has to be, you can't tear the flesh. It has to be, the animal has to be slaughtered with that razor sharp knife. So this means that sport hunting in Judaism is not allowed unless it's for survival. Because how do you kill an animal in a hunt? How do you hunt an animal and kill it without causing it pain? Next to impossible. Okay, anything that is cooked or prepared, okay, and it has to be supervised. If it's not in your home where you are the supervisor of kashrut in your home, in a commercial facility that, or a catering facility or a restaurant, it has to be supervised by a trained mashgiach, which is could be a rabbi, but he doesn't have to be an ordained rabbi. He's just one who is trained in the laws of kashrut, and he is there supervising the kitchen, making sure the kitchen is a kosher, fully kosher kitchen. Here's a picture where there's a mashgiach on the left, and he's putting his certification of kashrut on these prepared meals. And the mashgiach is the one who says these meals are good for people who keep kosher. Glatt kosher could be defined as like a fully and very stringently observed kashrut. When you hear the word glatt literally in Yiddish means smooth, and that refers to the lung of the animal. Part of what makes the animal fit for being kosher after it's slaughtered is the mashgiach will take a look at the lung, or actually the shochet takes a look at the lung and make sure the lung is totally smooth and without any blemishes or without any tumors or disease. So glatt literally means smooth, and it refers to the actual lung of the animal. Okay. Looking ahead, just keep moving very quickly. There's one more thing. Oh, this is important. No mixing meat with dairy. And that comes from 3 biblical sources where it says, you shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk. That appears twice in the book of Exodus. You shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk. And then later in the book of Deuteronomy, you shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk. What does this mean? Don't cook a calf in its mother's milk. So it's a mysterious line, and we don't know why. We literally don't know why, but the rabbis took this saying this is potentially a idol worshippers' way of cooking meat, and if idol worshippers do it, then we do not do that sort of thing. And how did the rabbis of old extrapolate from that terse statement in the Torah, that appears 3 times? They said, well, no mixing of meat and dairy at the same meal. So any meal that you sit down to, you cannot have both a meat entree or a dairy entree together. A meal that has dairy food is called milchik, and there can be no meat in a milchik meal. And a meal that has meat in it, even the smallest bit of meat, is called fleishik. These are Yiddish words that mean milkish and flesh-ish. And the twain shall never meet in a kosher home or in a kosher belly. So for instance, If it's a cheeseburger, no, not kosher. Reuben sandwich, not kosher. Chicken parmesan, not kosher. Um, or veal parmesan. By the way, in Orthodox Judaism, chicken is in the same category as beef, and that's something we spoke about in the class as well. We had a long discussion: is why is chicken in the same category as beef? Chickens don't nurse their young. Long discussion. All right, beef lasagna? No. Somebody said, well, if it's an Impossible Burger, can we have a cheeseburger? Yes. Or if it's a hamburger with vegan cheese, you can have that. Pepperoni pizza, that's a double no because it's both pork and meat and dairy at the same in the same table. All right. Here's an example of a meal that might sneak up on you. Okay, that looks good. Cauliflower steak, green beans. There's no dairy in that. Oh, look what's next to it. A glass of milk. Nope, can't be eaten at the same meal at the same table. Um, asparagus, potato, and beef steak looks okay, but if you look closely at the potato, oh, there's a little pat of butter in there or sour cream. Nope, can't do that. All right. Also, it extends to how you cook the meals and the utensils that you use. You have to have separate utensils and pots in your kitchen. You for meat, and then separate for meat dishes or any meal that has meat served in it. You have to have a whole separate set of utensils. If you have a meal that has dairy in it, um, you have to have a whole separate set of pots and utensils for dairy meals. So no, you can't eat those together. And somebody's in my office, but I can't talk to them right now. All right. Now, things that are neither meat nor dairy, but could be served with either, are parv, considered to be parv meals, neither milk nor meat. They can be served with either, but not at the same time. Fish is parv. You can serve fish with a meat meal. You could serve fish with a dairy meal. For instance, keeping kosher at home. Meat and dairy, as I said, meat and dairy products may not be cooked or consumed together. You should wait 6 hours after eating meat before eating dairy products. And also, if you eat a dairy meal, you have to wait only a half an hour before you eat meat. It's just a way of the rabbi saying, well, dairy exits your system a lot quicker than meat does, and you can rinse your mouth out easier from dairy. But meat stays in your system. It stays between your teeth. It stays in your gut for much longer. So therefore, you have to wait longer after eating meat before you eat dairy. And this separation applies to the dishes, cutlery, pots, pans, ovens, and utensils used. 2 sets of everything are required, one for meat and one for dairy, and are usually stored separately. And if you keep a kosher kitchen, you need a lot of room to store those. And some kitchens have 2 ovens, one for meat, one for dairy, 2 sinks, 2 dishwashers. Some have 2 refrigerators if you have the luxury of that much space. And then we're not even talking about Passover yet, when you need a whole nother dual set of dishes just for Passover, because those are a whole separate category of dietary restrictions. To signify that a certain food has been carefully supervised by a rabbi, a symbol or a hechsher is used. So you got to check the products you buy. So here's 6 different hechshers you might see. There are more than 6. And some are acceptable to some Jewish communities, but some hechshers are not acceptable to other Jewish communities, depending on the stridency and stringency of that Jewish community and their brand of orthodoxy. So you look at food labels that have a symbol that indicates they're kosher. And where do you find that? Like, say, okay, I picked up this box of Madeleines from the temple kitchen. I looked at the label. I'm looking. Closer up. Here's another closer view. And then I'm going to even get a little closer. Look there. There is the symbol for Kashrut right there. And then it says underneath it, this is dairy. That means there's dairy products in this, or this was cooked or prepared in a place that also has other dairy products. So this can only be served with a dairy meal, not a meat meal. Going on. Grains, vegetables, and fruit are automatically kosher. And laws of kashrut are not only about ways to elevate ourselves from the animals and separate ourselves from the animals who eat pretty much anything they want to eat or what their instinct tells them to eat. human beings have the choice, and we can vary our diets voluntarily. So the act of eating, which is an act of life and acknowledging life, we can sanctify that act by being choosy about our foods, observing laws of kashrut or degrees of kashrut. You don't have to go all the way, but you can certainly um, elevate your eating habits and making them sanctified and holy. So not only choosing the foods that we eat, but also eating with intentionality, stopping before you take that first bite and saying a blessing. So there are blessings for bread, meals that have bread. That's hamotzi lechem min haaretz. If we're going to drink wine or juice with our meal, we say the blessing that ends with Borei Pri HaGafen. If we eat an apple as a snack between meals, we stop and we say Borei Pri Ha'etz. So thank you for providing fruit from the tree. Vegetables from the ground, we say Borei Pri Ha'adamah. Um, for grains, things that are made with grains, we say Borei Mine Mizonot at the end of our blessing. And the formula for any other miscellaneous food, even the act of drinking a glass of water, is covered under this blessing, which is Shehakol Nihya Bidvaro. So there's a blessing for every category of food. And not only do we say a blessing before we eat, but we also say a blessing after we eat, which is called the Birkat Hamazon. All right, so that is a just a quick run through of my slideshow. There was a lot of discussion in class that sorry that was not able to record, but this gives you an idea of the basics of what we covered. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.